So how you doing? Can you give us a brief start again? Uh,
Like a brief introduction, you
yeah,
mean,
it's
I
been
guess.
like it's been like two,
Yeah,
3 weeks since I've done an interview, so I'm all like, oh
that's
god.
all right. I
Um,
uh, I've been doing a few lately. So yeah, my name is Matthijs. I'm a creative director for Pine, which we're making with our team Trollbound. Um, and I see some questions like, is it released today? No, it's like very early alpha, but it's shaping up to be a pretty cool game. So I'm excited to talk about it.
awesome. How big is this development studio? Because, just looking at like the facial animation, it looks like you've got some. You guys aren't just like straight out of college. You probably have some
We
industry
are pretty
experience.
much well, we're pretty much literally out of college.
Oh
We
wow.
do have we do have some industry experience. We worked at some bigger studios. Some of us worked on like Mafia 3, and but that was mostly like internships or extended internships or like
Hmm.
freelance work. Um, but we are all trained for the past 4 years. We've been trained like our education was focused on AAA industry, so we do have learned about the bigger engines and the bigger productions, and we try to sort of get to that quality as an indie studio. So we're making a sort of medium-sized game, but
Hmm.
on a slightly higher level than a lot of indie teams would try to figure out on their own.
So, you guys are where are you guys based in?
In the Netherlands,
In the
in a city
Netherlands.
called Breda. It's a beautiful little city in the south of the Netherlands. So
Awesome. And so you
yeah.
guys are literally straight out of college. And
Well,
how did you guys come together and do this?
like in 2013, we set up the company to like we were on school in game development school basically. A few programmers and artists and designers, and they all came together in projects at school. But we wanted to do some commercial projects on the side as well, right? We wanted to do our own things.
Hmm.
Um, so we set up a company and we thought, let's get this school thing out of the way at some point and start our own bigger projects. But what we could actually do just before we ended school was, as a graduation project, start something new, something bigger.
Hmm.
So we decided to make Pine, which has some experimental systems, and we tried to look at those and write a thesis about it and graduate with that, and actually try to see if we could keep on making Pine. And now, like 1 year later, almost, we're still going at it. So
Oh
yeah,
wow. So
yeah,
this game was 100% funded via
yes,
Kickstarter. So
yes,
tell us
very
a little
right.
bit
That's
about that. How was the Kickstarter experience? Did you guys
oh
expect
man.
to get funded? And what was going through your mind at the time?
Oh man, we've been preparing the Kickstarter for about 8 months. Back in October last year, we're on the Square Enix Collective, which is sort of a free crowdfunding platform where you can gauge some interest and
Mhm.
gather some feedback. Uh, and that all went pretty well. So we thought, we really need to go to Kickstarter at some point. But we kept on working on this trailer and on developing the game, getting the core concept in, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
So yeah, like 6 to 7 months later, we were finally going to Kickstarter, and that's been like a month ago now. I think there's 30 hours left,
Mhm.
and last night we were funded for 100,000 euros. So
Oh wow,
yeah,
that is awesome. And so, how big is the
it is
studio?
quite the experience.
Nice.
um, we are with 6 people.
Hmm.
We have one designer slash producer, that's me. We have two programmers, and we have three artists, and that's sort of the core team.
Hmm.
And then we're being held by Ratchet Audio, who make the music and the sounds.
Hmm.
And we have two freelance artists who sometimes help out with some creature design or some rigging. And there's a lot of friends around us who can always support us and help us. So it's a very good place to be in, I think.
Do you recommend keyboard and mouse or a Xbox controller?
I personally like the controller more.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit. They both work perfectly fine, and all the buttons are available. But I don't know. I'm just a controller player, so if you do that sometimes, then I would say
Absolutely.
controller.
Well, especially for a game like this, it seems like a controller probably would be best fit.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's pop this open, guys. This demo that I'm about to launch, is this available for others to try out as well?
Not at this moment. We've let it be play tested by about 3,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
But the demo is getting pretty old. So what we do right now
Mm-hmm.
is basically let it be played by streamers and YouTubers that we can actually, explain something to, or in this case, have an interview with that so that we can explain what our idea is behind it. Because at this point, the game is, slightly larger and differently structured than the demo you're about to play. So we're a bit, held back with that.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your team makeup? Like number of programmers, artists, like what is the breakdown?
What you're seeing here in the demo is being made by the 6 I just mentioned. So that's one character artist who focuses on, the player character, the enemies, and their weapons, etc. There's one environment artist who just does all the environments and the look and feel of things. He's also our art director, so he kind of oversees everything. And then there's one animator who, brings everything to life in movements. Then as far as programming goes, we had 2 programmers on this. They both equally work on, all systems. So it's not like one system programmer and one gameplay programmer. They're both basically general programmers. And then there's me as the designer. So I do the level designs and the overall vision of the game and the controls, the speeds, etc. So kind of smaller details.
Nice.
But yeah, like I said, this demo is super early. It's like pre-alpha 002. It's very much focused on getting the first data and the first bits of feedback on what we're making. So that's what you're seeing.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we got.
Now here's this dude. He's called a Cariblin, and he will of course try to fight you. And he's just trying out things right now. The way Pine works is that we give every single enemy, we give them a brain. And with the brain, you can actually go back on the rock, I think.
Oh, there we go.
I think my stream is a bit delayed, so I'm sorry if I'm...
Oh, yeah, no worries.
So every organism has a brain, and with that brain, we try to let them observe what the player is actually doing. Instead of, just randomly doing something that we designed, we let them try out different combos and different strategies against you. And based on how you play, they'll actually, change their strategies to win from you.
Oh.
So if you're very defensive, they will become more aggressive and try to break your defense. But if you're very fast and energetic, they will, have to keep up, so they become a little bit faster and they try to hit you more often instead of harder. So it's kind of being personalized to whoever is playing.
Where did the vision for Pine come up? Was it experimentation that led to this, or what was the lead up, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, of course, we're big fans of action adventure games, and I think a lot of people are. It's a very huge market. Games like Fable, The Legend of Zelda, and they're not being made enough, we think, especially in a style like this. Zelda comes out once every 7 years, and Fable, of course, hasn't been made at all anymore. So what we tried to do is sort of get a game out in that style and in that genre, and that was very, very important to us. But then there was also the idea we were playing with, which was sort of about adaptation and evolution. What we figured is, in a lot of games, when 10 enemies run towards you, and you slash the first 9 down, then the 10th one will still do exactly the same as the previous 9, right? They will not think about what they could have done differently. They're not learning from you. So we try to, experiment and research some ways to actually let enemies observe what is happening in the game world and try to let them do different things. And that kind of led us to some smaller technical demos, and we wanted to combine that with the more artistic value of games like Fable and Zelda, and that's where Pine came from, actually.
Oh, nice.
So, of course, the thing is that for this demo, it's not working perfectly for every player, but it's very interesting to see how the enemies are thinking and what we're trying to do to, oppose you specifically instead of every player in the same way. So these enemies, I didn't design them as, do this and this when the player is nearby, but I designed them as really look at what the player is doing and do what fits you best to survive this,
I'm starting to see how this works a little bit better. I've been doing the heavy attacks. That works only so well. Oh shit, this guy just kicked me.
Yeah, it's because you're very close to him. You know, he sees how close you are to him, and his brain thinks that he's not surviving because you're very close. So he's trying to. They try to hit you a lot from left and right, but they have to think of something to keep their distance to you because you're very close to them. You keep hitting them from the inside, basically with a heavy attack. And also things like blocking, they will try to figure out when the best time is to block, and they will try to figure out if there is a better, I don't know, momentum in the blocking or a better duration. And based on that, they will try to survive and see how you are playing, basically. Now, it's a very linear demo, as you can see. Like, you're making your way up a mountain, and each enemy does something slightly differently, but it's very much about letting those evolutionary systems adapt to you. So the final game that we're making right now is open world, but this demo, you know, is really from A to B and trying to see those combat mechanics.
Oh shit, new enemies. So these guys, oh shit, they have range too. Okay.
Yeah. And this is kind of a second thing in Vine. It's a very big concept that we wanted to get in, is that, you know, because we're not treating them as enemies but as sort of organisms and species, we wanted them to be a little bit more than these enemies. So what we have is a few bigger species in the game, like these two, and if they find each other in the world, they will also try to fight each other. And they will actually, you know, respond to what they're doing themselves instead of only when the player comes by. And this is sort of I guess, a vague line between simulation and entertainment, of course. But yeah, in the next level, we'll see that, you know, when two species are joined together, they will actually start to fight themselves.
Holy crap! So you mentioned they fight each other. You mean species of one type would potentially fight a species of a different type?
Yeah, exactly. So not that these guys would fight each other, because they're obviously like a culture, but that's just the thing. We wanted it to be just a bit more than you know, some sandbags that you hit on the way to your goal in the game. We wanted them to actually have meaning and have sort of a choice of their own. So in the final game, you'll have a world filled with all these species that just have quests of their own and try to, you know, interact with each other as well, and you're just simply one influence in that, instead of, you know, everything always resolving around the player.
Now, can I sneak attack?
The sneak attack is not in here yet. We put the very basic sneak movement in, which means they cannot hear you as effectively. But the full sneak attack obviously is going to be in the game, and it's going to be a full playstyle, but we wanted to see how often players were actually interested in sneaking past situations, or, you know, trying to avoid them. But yeah, we didn't have time for this demo to actually put all of that in the, like, a fully fledged sneaking style, but it should definitely need to be in there.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
So what kind of combat mechanics are not in this demo but are currently, I guess, working or targeted for the full game?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, there's only just a basic sword right now, and we're definitely experimenting with multiple weapons. And we also have a bow, for example, as you can see in the trailer. We have two-handed weapons and stuff we're trying to work out. But in terms of combat, it's becoming a lot more fluid and a lot more about the movement. Because we also added a jump, for example, which really does a lot to the actual movement that you're constantly doing. So jump, attack, etc. And yeah, it's just getting a bit more fluid in general and a bit more physical, I guess. This is a very basic setup so that we can really see how those adapting systems work right now.
So we see right down here, we've got the two species just going at it with one another.
Yeah, and what you could do, and obviously this is not a very fully fledged situation, but in the game you could decide to, you know, either help either one of them, or you could, you know, slash them both, or you can just ignore the full situation. And based on this, based on the concept of survival of the fittest, a species might get stronger in the world, and you will actually see more of them. You know, they will evolve into something stronger. And the way that works in this demo is that the species that comes out on top of this battle, and based on how you fought against them, the species on top of the mountain that you're currently traversing will actually be either one of those. So it can be the moose guys, the gremlins, or it can be the little
Holy
lizard
crap!
guys.
This guy's attack. Oh my lord! That guy just hit me with both his weapons and completely disintegrated my health. So, you spoke about how there's a lot going into the AI, not just
Yeah,
the
that's
AI,
true.
but also the evolution system or the world system.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, how does all that work? Is this using some kind of thing built into Unity? Is this a proprietary thing? Can you
Well, it
speak to
is
that?
a proprietary thing. Yeah, it's something we tried to experiment with from the start, which is basically, like I briefly touched upon. It's not treating them as enemies or as things we just design for brief situations, but we design a world full of organisms, full of species. It's very much generalized so that we can actually sort of simulate an ecology with different species struggling for survival. A hierarchy that brings some of the species on top, and you can see that in their population and in their, cultural advancements. But that can be any species, and that's very important to us. So based on how you play, the species that you see a lot or help a lot will actually land on top, and that's sort of a different approach to designing some situations and trying to make a game about fight that enemy and then fight that enemy, trying to make it a bit more alive, I guess.
In terms of like gathering that information, do you guys have like some kind of analytics thing built into the demo?
Yeah, it's a lot about the experience though. So we do get a lot of data, which can show us how the system very technically work, right? But in the end, it's very important to us that it feels as if the game is listening to you, right? That it's a bit more personal than just the game we design and you have to play through. So it's all about how you experience the evolution and the change. So we're trying to, through the surveys that you saw at the end of the demo, and through talking to people on conferences, we try to, figure out what makes it sort of personal for players. I don't know if you're familiar with the Shadow of Mordor Nemesis system, for example.
Yeah, great game by the way.
Yeah, great game and also a great mechanic, right? They have these orcs, and it's very personal because these orcs try to remember who you are, etc. And this sort of personalized story is not very hard to make. It's just that it's your entire game needs to be built around that. They're trying to go for that sort of sense of personalization of the game, sort of the feeling that the game knows who you are and what you're doing, or trying to, what you're trying to, how you're trying to fight or how you're trying to play.
Oh, I see.
So we do get a lot of data, yeah.
So, in terms of, so what stage are you guys currently in development?
Yeah, it's still definitely pre-alpha. It's very important for us to keep that experimentation phase going for as long as possible, because as you can see, we have quite a few bigger ideas and mechanics, and we're trying to incorporate them all together.
Awesome.
And through streams like this, even, and through testing a lot with people, from when we started in February last year, like 5 weeks after we released our first demo to the public. And it was to like 200 people, but we could immediately see some feedback and gather ideas about it, etc. And that was kind of important to us. So it's gonna be pre-alpha for I think at least this year. And we're trying to get an alpha out in February next year, and then a beta in the summer, and then in November it will finally release after we've done a lot of balancing and a lot of prototyping basically or iterating.
I see. Now, so right now you guys are probably experimenting with the combat. I imagine there's other mechanics in the game. So, what other mechanics are you guys looking to bring into the title? So we know it's open world. We know it's got this evolution system. It's got this adaptive combat built into it.
Well, the thing is that this one is very much focused on the combat. But what's interesting as well is that these species, which you can sort of help or hinder, right, as you could see in the last level of the demo, we want you to be able to do that in different ways and interact with them as well. So obviously these species need food and they need shelter. They have a territory. So for us, it's interesting to bring in mechanics that you can give them food, or you can steal or destroy their food, or you can enlarge their territories or break their territories, or you could, if you know there are certain species is enemies with another one, you could, join their conflict and actually fight either one of them and see what happens and see who comes out on top and try to it's sort of a diplomatic system almost, where
Oh, I
you're
see.
just one influence in this breathing world of species. And it's actually, a lot of people call this very ambitious and very impossible, but it's actually not that hard to make. It's just that the entire game is sort of put in this mindset where things are always alive and also interacting with each other instead of just with the player.
So that actually brings up the question, like with a world that's constantly at flux,
Yeah,
how are you guys going to build a story around that? Like, I imagine
right.
there's a story you guys are working on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Um, and maybe could you tell us a little bit about like the story, kind of like the what to expect, whatever you're able to actually say. I'm sure some of that
Absolutely.
is still
Yeah,
being
yeah. Of
worked
course,
out.
you have some secrets in that, but the basic story is actually that humans never landed on top of the food chain on this island where
Mm,
Pine is set. So humans are actually just inferior, physically pretty inferior species. We're not that impressive, right? We're pretty small. We're not that strong.
mm-hmm,
So we actually live in seclusion in some forests, and we're a very small tribe.
mm-hmm.
And you play as you, and at some point the tribe becomes endangered because the territory is breaking down. Some trees are rotting, so you need to find a new place to live. And to do that, you have to go out in the open where you've never actually been, and you'll meet all these species and see all their own lives and quests. And through that, you'll actually have to find a new place for the humans to live, where they can live in safety and freedom.
Ah,
Um, and that's kind of the leading story there. And on the way, you will have to collect a few big items in certain spots on the island that help you get there. So it's sort of a yeah, it's quite a simple story, but it's all about the interaction with the species as you go along.
mm.
So it's more about the actors in the world than about the real big Last of Us like story.
Ah, I see, I see. So what do you are you guys targeting a? Do you guys have a target release date?
Yes, definitely. We're planning for November 2018, which is quite a long way off.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of this time will go into balancing the ecology because at some
Mm.
point, someone from Naughty Dog once said, I think it was a designer, he once said, the hardest part about making games is that you don't know what your game is until everything is in there, right?
Right, right, right.
Yeah, so we try to build all these species and the full ecology once, like for the alpha next year,
Mm-hmm.
so early next year.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's all about balancing out the options that all these species have, because if we really want a living and breathing ecology, they should have sort of an equal chance to start off with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it should be equally fun to work with the species number 2 and species number 3, for example. So we
Ah.
really have to try and you know get this system going that really truly breathes and is dynamic. So that will be a lot of the time.
Will each species have their own base, like a castle or a cave, or are they going to be kind of like scattered, maybe many
And that's the
villages or something?
thing. If you can click on blogs, actually,
Mm-hmm.
one of the latest blogs, I think, on the website has some information about this. Um, what we have is based on how well a species is doing in the ecology, they will have an increasing amount of bases and territory.
Ah.
So if there's a very strong creature, such as the moosemen, the carriglins in the trailer,
Mm-hmm.
they will actually have a pretty strong base, with good materials such as stone and metal.
Uh-huh.
And if they're very weak, they will only have a few tents scattered across the island, right?
Mm-hmm.
So based on how good they are, they will, evolve in the sense that their community becomes stronger and their culture becomes stronger. Here,
Oh,
for
I see.
example, you can see some houses of the Caribbeans in different stages and in different, materials and different advancements. So it's very much about how well a species is doing based on that, yeah, the camps across the island will change actually.
Oh, I
So
see.
it's not that you have one species that has one camp somewhere on the island. It's just that if they become stronger, you will see more and more of them with increasingly better built houses and tools actually.
You had mentioned that the humans on this island, they're kind of the underdog uh, versus some of these
Yeah,
other species.
yeah.
How do the humans get to that island? Is that something that you guys
Yes, actually, that's good thinking. Part of the story you will touch upon, of course, I'm not going to spoil too much, but
Mm-hmm.
you're going to touch upon how the history of that island came to be, right? Because it's as we call it, sort of an alternate evolutionary course that
Mm-hmm.
has been taken on the island. And every species that we design, we try to ask ourselves, what if a certain animal on Earth would have evolved just a bit differently, right? What if a lizard would have to, use their spit to actually, be stronger or survive? Then you would get the letters that you saw in the demo. And for each of these species, we have a little backstory. And just in general, the island has evolved in such a way that made the humans inferior. So there is a backstory about that, and you will actually find out in the game. So
What about like day-night cycles, weather systems? Is that something you guys
yeah,
have looked into? And
absolutely.
have you thought about how that may affect the gameplay when that is to occur? For example, you
Yes,
with the
definitely.
AI, I noticed that there is some kind of vision system in place. When I was
Hmm.
able to sneak around the little creatures that spit in the cave. Um,
Yeah. For example, the spitting creatures, we call them the litters. They in a day-night cycle, you would imagine that they would be able to see better in the dark than you would, right?
mhm.
So the day-night cycle becomes sort of a thing that's important for the species as well. And the same goes for weather. We're prototyping right now with, for example, with if there's a storm raging somewhere on the island, the species will actually have to migrate if they don't have sufficient shelter, right? So
Mhm.
it's sort of again, it's this sort of simulation on the island where the species will move around and you will actually encounter new species if if the weather acts as such. So the weather and day and night actually becomes more important to the world than in a general game where it's just designed around the player, right?
Mhm.
Um, so in a normal game, a player would be slower when it rains, for example, or in Zelda you can't climb the rocks, I believe, if it rains. Um, but we want species to also not be able to do something when it rains, or we want them to be stronger when the sun shines, or whatever.
Mm.
It's kind of again, it's this general system that we want to apply to all organisms instead of to just the player.
Mm. So another question. Is there a plan to have so there's a lot of different games in this, I guess, this space.
Yeah.
They tend to go down one of two routes. One is a leveling system.
Hmm.
Another is, where you unlock perks as you do things. Another
Right.
is, upgrades like armor
Right. Yeah.
upgrades, weapon upgrades, or, and then I guess there is a third route, which is kind of more along the lines of Zelda or
Hmm.
traditional Zelda, which is, finding uh,
Certain.
items that
Yeah.
change give you a bigger tool set of,
Yeah.
survivability and
Yeah.
offensive things.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So which one you mean?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, we're not a big fan of games that present you like the standard RPG that presents you with hundreds of numbers that you need to keep track of and stats,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
Mm-hmm.
that you need to upgrade. We're also not big fans of the skill trees and in general Ubisoft games where you just select what you want to be better at,
Mm-hmm.
especially given the theme of evolution that we're trying. Um, so I think Martin, our programmer in the chat, already touched upon this a little bit, but what happens in the game is that there are four main sort of points where you're puzzling your way through a little area, and at the end of that area, you have sort of an item as a bonus,
Mm.
as a reward. Sorry. So that's sort of similar to the Zelda dungeons, and these items actually expand your options on the island. One of them, for example, is the air glider that you can see in the trailer, where you can
Mm.
float over the island and traverse larger gaps. And another one is also on the Kickstarter page. It's called the Igniter, which is
Mm.
sort of a small flamethrower ish
Mm.
item, which also helps you. It doesn't only help in combat, but it can also enlarge or damage the territories of species. You can shoo some species away, so that changes their behavior and their movement, etc.
Mm.
So we do want these bigger items to have an impact on what you do in the game. So that's sort of the progression we're looking at.
Ah, I see. Nice. When you fight a species, does that also improve how the species fights other species?
Ah, this one is interesting. We also had this question on Kickstarter a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what we're doing right now is experimenting with. So the way this works is that the species have a brain, as I said, and the
Mm-hmm.
brain tries to evolve towards the player. But that goes for each organism, so that within a fight, they actually try to observe and learn for what you do. And that observation and that evolution also goes for them as a species as a whole. But if they would learn from each organism on the island, so from each other as well, it would kind of come across as too random, because somewhere on the island two could be fighting, and then their style would change based on something you weren't even there to witness, and that's kind of dangerous. Also for performance, obviously, if we need to let every organism on the island constantly check everything, that's going to be a bit too heavy. But what we are doing right now is giving them sort of a brain portion per species, so that the Caribbeans learn how to fight against the letters, but it's not that every individual Caribbean will learn how to fight against every individual letter. So it's more of a sort of a lightweight version of what they do against the player.
Right. Well, so yeah, because I can imagine. So what we witnessed on the mountain, where those, where the two species were both fighting each other.
Yeah.
That was very clear cut how they're fighting against one another or whatnot. And then we saw that there was 3 of the caribou. Was it?
Yeah, Caribbean. Yes.
They ended up, I guess, since they won the fight down below, you're displaying the example of what would happen. We had them as opposed to the other guys show up. Now, I can imagine players may actually witness some of these battles like we did on the mountain. But some of these battles happening like off screen. How is that going to work? Presumably, I mean, it's not going to be fully. It's going to be a lighter simulation. I think that's what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, that's important to us. Yeah, it's kind of like I said, a lot of games are very player centered, right? They are when the player's not there, nothing happens, right? Everything is inactive until there's sort of an activity space around the player to make sure that they can just see everything and everything happens around them. But what we want to focus on is that the player has to actually respond to what they're seeing in the environment instead of the game responding to them. And we think this can be very interesting, that you're just running around. You actually have to, I think this is very natural to the genre that it's in, right? You're playing this guy and you're just running across the island, and you have to actually see what situations pop up instead of we design some situations around the player. And we see this as a trend in game development as well. Ubisoft is trying to do this more and more. There are some talks on developer conferences that they're doing where they try to explain that they're trying to make their games sort of anecdote factories, right? They're making the systems, and the player runs around in that and tries to respond to those anecdotes and actually create stories through that.
I see.
And we think that's a very interesting approach, and it's not that hard to make. It's just that, it's a very different approach to designing a very linear game.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I read, I saw in chat the mention of neural networks being kind of the core of these systems.
Yeah.
And I also noticed on the page it's using state machines for, is that for the fighting, or it's probably for a lot more?
For everything, basically. Yeah, exactly. It's every one of them has a pretty advanced state machine with which they just live and basically decide what to do. And the neural networks are mainly iterating on the combat side of things. So we have a neural network for blocking, for example, that tries to figure out what the best blocking timing is and the best blocking duration, etc. Then we have a neural network for dodging. We have a neural network for attacking. And throughout the game, these neural networks are iterated upon at a pretty high speed, and they try to, figure out what the best strategy is, actually.
I see. Thank you so much for joining us today and showing us this really neat title. I have to say the art style is fantastic. It definitely does sound ambitious, but clearly it is. It looks like you guys are making your way towards the next phase.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I would love to check back with you guys in the future.
Definitely. I hope we can keep in touch. I'll gladly show you the rest of the game and how it pans out.
Awesome, guys. Can we show him? Can we thank him, guys, in chat? Thank you once again, Matt.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
looking forward to checking this game out as it progresses along.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'll gladly watch the stream progress. So Thank you.
Thank you. Hey guys, I hope you liked that clip. If you want to see more awesome content, be sure to hit subscribe. And let me know what you think by hitting the like button or, leaving a comment down below. Catch you later.